The Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, is reportedly still confident about the SAA deal, despite this blow-up, it seems, within the strategic equity partner. In 2021, in the middle of the year, Gordhan announced that the Takatso consortium would buy a 51% stake in SAA, and in return, that consortium would invest $3 billion in the airline over 2 years. But the deal has dragged, and now the airline veteran Gidon Novick has resigned. Let's discuss further. We're joined by aviation analyst Desmond Latham. Desmond, thank you for being with us as always. So I spoke to Gidon Novick earlier, and it is confusing to me. Perhaps there is a conflict of interest, but surely the majority partner in Takatso consortium, and everybody knew that that was there right from the beginning.
Sorry, I'm muted there. Thank you very much for having me first. Secondly, yes, from the start of this whole process, that was very clear and on the table. I mean, Gidon Novick had just launched Lift, he could just go back into the aviation game, which is kind of a high-level airline itself, and he had plans for that. And next moment we hear he's joining this consortium, Takatso consortium, which features global aviation, or airlines, or airways as it's known, and Harith Partners, which is owned partly by the Public Investment Corporation. So that fact that he's been involved from the start of this has meant that there was initial allegations of conflicts of interest. And he, at the time, was particularly clear about saying that, as far as he is concerned, he's working outside of the ambit. SAA has got a large number of external flights planned and so on, and Lift is very much a domestic airline. So that was how he described it. But for most of us watching this from outside, it did appear that there would be an obvious conflict of interest.
So what should have happened? Should they have got a different CEO? He also, let's listen to what he says. He wanted information from Harith on the funding, the plans, when this would actually happen. He said that's got nothing to do with SAA operations.
Yes. I mean, what you can see happening there is that you've got a person who understands how airlines work and has worked as an airline CEO, working alongside investors who are infrastructure investors. Harith are famous and a large entity. I mean, they've got hundreds of millions of dollars, really, they've worked on over the years of investments throughout Africa. So, but they do infrastructure. They do wind farms and they do power stations and so on. They don't do airlines. They do airports, and there's a close link between Harith, for example, and Lanseria International. There's a board link there. So there is an aviation background, but I can tell you, and we all know this, that it's very different running an airline to running an airport. Because an airport's all about toilets and parking and landing strip and ATNS, which is the ATC services, etc. And running the airline is about aeroplanes and pilots and ground crew. And those are two very different things. So we said from the start of this that without someone who knows how to operate in an airline environment effectively as a business person, that SAA is going to be in some trouble, and so will the investment partners.
All right, so and losing Gidon Novick then is huge in terms of the skills that he bought. That was the deal, that he or his minority partner would bring the leadership skills, the airline know-how. Everybody wants to know if and how Harith will raise the $3 billion to make this happen. So we all remain in the dark. Is that correct?
Well, we do and we don't. I mean, you've got to look at who owns Harith, and that's pretty much PIC. As soon as you have a 30% on the holding at a level of shareholding, you basically control the company. It doesn't have to be 51%. If you're a large shareholder, you can imagine the others are mixed. Then Harith is pretty much beholden to some extent to the PIC. And the PIC is about to go through new laws, which come into effect in January next year, January 3rd, just after New Year's Day, which will mean that the PIC's funds can be accessed by people who are going to invest in things that are not necessarily infrastructure, but transport generally. So the perception is that Gordhan and co are just biding their time until the new law kicks in next year, and then they will gain access to PIC funds, the government employees pension fund investments, to reinvest in SAA. So I think what has happened here is that we talk about accountability and governance and so on in business environment, and this is another case in point where there seems to be a lack of transparency in this deal. And we're told it's because of confidentiality, but the problem is that we're dealing with, to a large extent, with state workers' money in the future that may be up for grabs here. So this is not a small thing that we're asking a question. Where is the cash coming from? Who's funding it? And what's the deal, please? Let us know. And we keep getting told, oh, we'll tell you. But we've been told this since May of this year. And it's now the end of the year. And so we expect that's what's going to happen here.
That is very interesting. So if the law is going to change, if that'll smooth things over in terms of funding, can you at least say that you think privatization will happen? It will happen.
Well, it won't be privatized. It'll still be state-linked. And I think the important thing is to understand
51%, I mean, you're basically privatizing.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I don't want to hedge this too much, other than to say that SAA's entire route system and the way it functions is linked to the state. So it can be state-owned, but not necessarily government-run. I think that's the important thing I'm trying to point out here. So it will be privatized to an extent, but NUMS and the other unions involved with the ANC in managing and being involved in the government will be happier that government still has a look in on that deal. It's not willy-nilly privatization. Gordhan himself, as a Communist Party member, he will not like the idea of capitalists taking over the airline that used to be South African-owned. You can see that this is a political decision as well as an economic decision. So we mustn't also lose touch with the fact that Gordhan has attached his wagon to SAA since 2016 when he was finance minister. He's had a long history of trying to pull SAA into some kind of shape. So, 6 years he's been working on this personally. So I think it's become quite a bugbear in his life, quite obviously. Now in public works, it's like the final phase of this deal. And as far as he's concerned, he has to make this work for a number of reasons, internally and externally, and for ideological reasons.
Yeah, well, let's hope there is success. This has been in the works for a very long time. Thank you for that interesting analysis, aviation analyst Desmond Latham.